and we appreciate you all being here. This morning is a really interesting group of talks and looking a little bit more at the future. And I think you'll learn a lot and enjoy it. So I also want to present some of the work that we have done with BCI, very early work, and I want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Stephanie Plummer. Can you raise your hand in the back there, Stephanie? Stephanie spent a year and a half with us. She's from Australia, but she did come back for this meeting. So thank you, Stephanie, for all your hard work and pandemic endurance and so forth. So I'm going to present a little bit of the work we've done in the lab in a minute, but I have no disclosures. And I wanted to lead off with this here, which, Elon Musk has said in 2020 that within 2 years, he would have our brains connected to computers. Well, it's 3 years now, but perhaps some progress has been done. And as you probably hear from Dr. Moko, that he really perhaps is serving his role and very vital in the attention he can bring as well as the funding. So the question is, we've been doing surface recording, we've been doing deep stimulation recording, and I put in depth electrodes and things like that. But is there more that can be done? Neuralink, they've been, as far as I know, a little secretive about exactly what they're doing, but they have probes with up to 96 wires. They use a platinum conductor. They insert by a surgical robot. At least in the last version I saw, over 3,000 individual electrodes. They know how to amplify and acquire signals. But beyond that, not a lot I know. But the principle is that there's a lot more to be done, perhaps under the surface. The brain, as we said yesterday, with subcortical access is the last organ to be conquered on the internal aspect. And as you know, in the 3-pound brain, there are so many subcortical nuclei, white matter pathways, and perhaps very enriched targets for different neurological and even mental health diseases. I think it's fun to look at the history and how this was sort of figured out. So the Galvanis, Luigi and his wife Lucia, were given credit for realizing that if they put an electrical current to a dead frog's nerve, the muscle would contract. So the term in 1780 became bioelectricity. Volta proved an important part that the electricity could be generated chemically, and that electrical activation can control not only our motion, but also probably everything else that our central nervous and peripheral nervous systems do, including thoughts and other aspects of our sensory experience. Berger, probably in 1930, designed the first EEG to begin recording. And so the ensuing decades, there was interfacing for sensation, movement, functional restoration. I think Roy Bouquet in 1998 was one of the first to demonstrate that an implanted BCI electrode would be beneficial for ALS. So after that followed, of course, many technical developments, scientific questions, neurophysiological discoveries, initial projects, electrode designs, decoding methods, bridging strategies for damaged pathways, feedback, targets, and advances in material sciences. So certainly many others are going to follow, and AI may play an important role as well. And I don't want to overlook the development of our modern computer, beginning with the discovery of the transistor. Shockley and John Bourdain and Walter Brattain were given the Nobel Prize in 1956 for discovering that you can make a semiconductor work. So semiconductor has both stimulation and it has resistance, has conductance and resistance. And then, of course, as the transistor was applied to the microprocessor you see here, the incredible, now estimated 1 billion times increase in computer power over the last 50 years. And many people deserve credit for this. A great book, The Innovators by Walter Isaacson, is a great summary of this journey. So we've been doing deep brain stimulation. Of course, we've been doing implants like cochlear implants. We've been doing RNS. So I'll put an RNS system in, and we have two leads that we can use to stimulate and record. And so we're already doing it. A few years ago, we did the first study on morbid obesity, deep brain stimulation. I don't know if you can read the paper in the upper right, but we used electrodes in the hypothalamus in the satiety center to try to influence that. The work has been limping along, but is still proceeding. So with implant technology, of course, there's recording and there's stimulation. The ability to take that beyond a small number of electrodes and a small number of stimulation gives us great hope for what could become for neurological, post-traumatic, post-stroke, and psychiatric disorders. So our simplistic concept was, well, if we just have electrodes or wires, what about the power of a microprocessor? What about a power of just an IC, integrated circuit? So with the Rogers Research Group at Northwestern University, we began this project, as you see summarized here, and that was really to see if it was feasible to put with our insertion technology an integrated circuit into the mammalian brain. And so we did a few things. We had a modified NICO brain path port, courtesy of Joe Mark and Jim Pearson. We facilitated implantation with the cerebral nutrient factor, which contains several things, oils that we thought not only eased insertion, but also tolerance. And then we analyzed them. And here's the two chips that we used, a smaller one by 0.5 millimeters, and the other 2 by 1.25 millimeters. So here's sort of the technique. It's pretty simple. We made bilateral burr holes in the bregma, and there you see the chip in the upper center against the gauze, how small it is. And then through the modified brain path port, we inserted the chip you see in the bottom middle, the cerebral nutrient factor, oils helping that process. Here's a short video showing it. So our real intent was to see, well, can we insert it? That's number one. Number two, will the animals die? They have a silicon-based, not very small, but small object in their brain. And then we looked and we saw the usual track changes in macrophages and some cystic cavitation. And you see on the right, where the microtome actually transected one of the chips, and that's a phenomenon as you go to analyze them neuropathologically. So our results was with 17 animals, we had no mortality, all recovered normally. They were sacrificed at 1 and 3 months. There was no evidence of infection, wound healing problems, neurological deficits, and none were extruded. And then we did, as I mentioned, saw the reactive gliosis, the scattered CD3 positive lymphocytes and macrophages and monocytes. We did not find any evidence of excessive scar or really any scar. So we felt that this conclusion of this project was that, yeah, you can technically insert, which is problem number one, and you can show a mammalian brain tolerating an integrated circuit presence. So we're building upon back to what we talked about yesterday, this 6 pillars of MIPS approach. So looking at the concepts of tractography and imaging, navigation, optics, access, resection, but in this case we weren't resecting, but the 6th pillar was always the most intriguing, and especially again in honor of our decade in doing this, we didn't know what that would be at that time. We thought stem cells, but really the sky's the limit, and I believe this a very basic platform of a 6 pillars MIPS approach using a brain path does make sense. And so we know that that we can easily go transsulcal. We can do our work. And Cam will like this video here. It shows that for years, we think we can access all deep areas, and not only for resection, but also implantation. So there's a lot of hope out there, a lot of speculation, not a lot of research that BCI applications may apply for neurodegenerative diseases. For example, control of prosthetic devices, recovery after stroke, neurodevelopmental or psychological problems, neurodegenerative progressive diseases, Parkinson's disease, ALS, Alzheimer's, and others. We think at this point that maybe they can't be cured, but perhaps we can alleviate symptoms, slow progression, and then one day look towards cure. So there's some emerging evidence that deep brain stimulation for depression, for post-traumatic stress disorder, as you see here, the targets in both of those entities could be of great interest. So in summary, I think we have shown it's technically feasible. There's a lot of questions for progress, wearable versus surgically implanted. What are the risks? Surgical risk, infection, glial scarring, replacement. Do they have a half-life? What about the power source? And we have some early usage. What about the long-term health effects, including psychological? What about the authenticity, empowering someone's abilities to be their own? What about enhanced cognition? And so use for other things than pathological changes. And then there's the emerging concepts of artificial recurrent and convolutional neural networks as the targets. A new generation of implants is on the horizon and really exciting about further possibilities, whether it's a single electrode or whether it's something that's enabled with millions of transistors. And these are the challenges: implantation, wired versus wireless, the immune reaction. Does the gliosis eventually interfere with conductivity? What about high data output? Is that possible? The fidelity, the long-term fidelity, especially with scar tissue, safety, and are they placed open or endovascularly? So for a long time, I think that the cerebral venous system has been underutilized, unappreciated, and not tapped into. Our next speaker, Dr. Jay Moko from Mount Sinai, we're very pleased to have him and appreciate him coming from New York to describe the first FDA-approved clinical trial for the Stentrode by Syntron. And so again, where does this all fit? It certainly has very, very attractive features, which we'll hear about. So that's my overview, our initial work with implantation and acquisition and insertion.